Despite international warnings, Houthi militia continues to use Hodeidah port for military purposes. U.S. Senate and allies pressure President Biden to act immediately and redesignate Houthis as a terrorist group. The Yemen embassy in Warsaw instructs citizens trapped in Ukraine to move to Poland. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news with me, Rushan Fouad. Despite the United Nations and the Arab Coalition constant warnings to Houthi militia not to use Hodeidah's port for military purposes, the militia seems to have taken all such warnings for granted and continue to dig underground tunnels and fill them with arms. The following report has more details on this.
The Houthis insist on controlling the city of Hodeidah and turning it into military barracks for smuggling Iranian weapons coming through the ports of Hodeidah and the coastal strip, and by doing so they have turned the Red Sea into a time bomb that threatens the international shipping corridor. The Houthis' methods were varied, through which the Iranian-backed group aimed to make the city of Hodeidah and its strategic port a vast camp and a corridor for smuggling Iranian weapons, which previously received commercial goods and other consumable materials to feed the local market in most Yemeni governorates and recently humanitarian aid. The Houthis were not satisfied with controlling its port and leaving it out of business after their cards and the obstacles that the Iran-backed Houthi militia constantly put in place were exposed. The militia had started 2 years ago to implement its plan by building 3 main tunnels in the city center and all ending in the port, and its tracks began from the hour round to the new market, ending in the workers' city and the port. The militia justified the large excavations in the streets of the city of Hodeidah by constructing water spheres, which observers considered an unreasonable justification and a cover-up for a painful reality in which the Houthi militia turned the city of Hodeidah and its residential neighborhoods into military barracks, and the delivery of smuggled weapons to the militia that served Tehran's colonizing agenda in the region at the expense of Yemen and the Yemenis. Houthis continue to put Yemen and the entire region at danger, just for the sake of their own benefits.
A human rights center announced that more than 1,540 violation cases committed by the Houthis against civilians in Al-Bayda during the past year. A recent report issued by the Monitoring Center for Rights and Development showed an increase in cases of violations in the districts of Al-Zahir, Al-Suma, Nata, and Nu'man. The violations included displacement of more than 1,086 families and the fall of 69 victims, whether dead or wounded. Mayun Organization for Human Rights and Development condemned the campaign of arrests carried out by the Houthi militia against employees of embassies and United Nations offices in Yemen. The U.S. Embassy in Yemen held the Houthi militia responsibility for kidnapping one of its employees, stressing that the militia continues to use innocent civilians as pawns in the conflict. A number of embassy employees in Sana'a are living in a state of panic as a result of the Houthi militia's arrests of a number of their fellow employees. The U.S. President Joe Biden faces criticism over failure to address the terrorist violence of Houthi militia, as he says it is not the time to give up on nuclear talks with Iran. According to observers, this deliberation on the part of the U.S. administration could encourage Houthis to go further in their aggression inside Yemen and beyond border. The following report has more details.
The Houthis as an organization have carried out terrorist attacks targeting civilians and U.S. personnel, and they should be redesignated as such by the Biden administration. The U.S. must exert leadership to help alleviate these awful conditions. There are multiple steps that can be taken. It begins with taking action and putting an end to the deliberation. For far too many Yemenis, time already has run out or soon will. The clear objective should be getting aid to those who need it and punishing those who are preventing aid from getting where it needs to go. The Houthis are the primary obstacle to addressing the catastrophic humanitarian crisis. As the crisis worsens, it is the Houthis who have raised the war tempo in the country, and indications from Washington are the Biden administration is divided on how to respond. Designation of Houthis as a terrorist organization should go hand in glove with continuing to designate individual Houthis as terrorists and sanctioning them appropriately. One does not exclude the other. With the stakes as high as they are, the Biden administration should pursue both avenues. With the impending calamity that is facing Yemen, the U.S. working through the UN and humanitarian organizations should focus on getting relief supplies into the country for immediate distribution. Much of the relief has been going through a single port facility to Hodeidah. This port has been the best facilities in the country, but is also controlled by the Houthis. Given the real possibility for the Houthis to steal, manipulate, and profit from aid distribution, the single port is insufficient. The U.S. should encourage countries to participate in an upcoming pledging conference in Sweden. The immediate shortfall in financial support for relief efforts need to be addressed. The conference provides the best opportunity for the international community to help make that happen. Iran continues to use Yemen and the Houthis as force to destabilize the region. It has no regard for the suffering it is imposing on the people of Yemen. It is this fact that the United States should never forget it as the Biden administration continues the dangerous and ill-advised effort to enter a nuclear deal with Iran.
A Houthi shelling targeted citizens on residential neighborhoods east of Taiz with a number of missiles. The sources stated that a number of shells fell in the neighborhood of Muhammad Ali Uthman School, Wadi Saleh and Shammaisi neighborhood, causing heavy material damage to citizens' homes. Government forces managed to shoot down a Houthi militia drone the day after 4 aircrafts were shot down in Hajjah. Meanwhile, the coalition destroyed a military tank belonging to the Houthi militia north of Abs. The coalition targeted 8 air raids for militia gatherings and military patrols in the banks southeast of Harad. The 5th Military Region announced the downing of a Houthi militia combat drone north of Abs district in Harad. Field sources said that the government forces went through violent battles against Houthis that attacked their positions in the Thabit front northwest of Saada. According to the sources, the battles ended with the failure of the Houthis' attack, forcing them to retreat and inflicted human and material losses on them. Houthi militia continues to assault education in Yemen. It has injected school curriculums with its sectarian ideology to brainwash generations of children, as to make them join their war fronts. The following report has more details.
Children in Yemen are paying the heaviest price due to the ongoing war, rather by displacement, murdering, kidnapping, dropping out of school, and being exposed to malnutrition. Reflecting to what is happening in Yemen, Houthis insist on involving children in the war game ignited by the militia. Houthi militia continues to abuse education and inject curriculums of its sectarian ideology in an attempt to plant destructive ideas among those poor children's minds, who have no other choice but to subject to the militia's forced policies. This has driven so many families to escape and leave their homes and lives behind them, and they voluntarily choose displacement in order to protect their children. According to reports, Houthi rebels forced new academic curriculum, which promotes sectarianism and glorifies the Houthis and their foreign allies. Houthis didn't only intervene in school curriculums, but they have also made changes to the Islamic cultural study programs, which have been taught at Sana'a. An academic facilitator described Houthis' intervention in the academic curriculum as a disaster by all standards and an insult to the minds of academics and students. Yemeni educators have also stated that the added sectarianism to school curricula in Houthi-run areas will work to block and remold the minds of the upcoming generation. On the same note, school sources in Sana'a reported that Houthis are implementing a wide range of changes in curriculums, especially those concerning primary and elementary teaching. Some of the subjects which have witnessed the most alterations were Islamic and Quranic studies. According to conducted statistics, Houthification of education allows the brainwashing of at least 5 million students in Yemen and bound to generate extremism. Yemeni government officials and local human rights activists have further accused the Houthis of brainwashing and training primary school students for war, as Houthis didn't only made changes to the education curriculum, but also they were turning schools into military training camps. The Houthis' forced curriculum has made education under attack, and the threat has found its place among the young generations, with neither mercy nor compassion.
The International Committee of Red Cross and Red Crescent Society distributed the second phase of emergency food assistance. The committee arranged to distribute food aid to around 4,410 internally displaced people in the district of El Adin and Ib. IDPs in these districts were displaced due to the recent hostilities in Hodeidah. Therefore, the committee decided to help them. The Houthi militia launched a campaign of armed robbery on the properties and homes of forcibly displaced people in a number of governorates, especially Dammar. Local sources in Sana'a stated that the Houthi Judicial Guard began the tasks of precautionary seizure of the properties of anti-militias in Dammar. Mayun organization explained that these unjustified violations came after all means of blackmailing the relatives of the victims in the name of the war efforts. The United Nations has warned that the escalating fighting has deepened the suffering of internally displaced people, especially women and children. This comes amid alarms made by international aid agencies that they would suspend work in Yemen because of funding crisis. More details on this are within this report.
Internal displacement remains one of the defining features of the Yemen crisis since the beginning of the war in 2014. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees said that during 2021 alone, over 157,000 Yemenis were forced to flee their homes due to the conflict, particularly in Ma'rib, Taiz, Al-Hodeidah and Al-Bayda governorates. New displacement is exacerbating the existing humanitarian needs, drastically increasing the need for shelter, essential household items, water and sanitation, education, and protection services, particularly for children. Yemenis' lives are in danger, and access to humanitarian aid is becoming harder every day. More than 4 million people are displaced, of which 80% have been displaced for over a year. Up to 1.6 million of the displaced Yemenis are living in one of 2,200 hosting sites. There were more than 120,000 individuals newly displaced in 2021. Women and children represent 79% of the displaced population. According to the 2021 Humanitarian Needs Overview, 66% of Yemen's 30 million population depends on humanitarian assistance for their daily survival, including over 4.2 million IDPs. With ongoing and unrelenting hostilities, and in the absence of a negotiated political settlement, the trend of new and protracted displacement is expected to continue in 2022. Escalation of conflict, ongoing insecurity, restrictions, and a collapsed economy have pushed an estimated 80% of the total population below the poverty line and at serious risk of famine, with IDPs significantly more at risk of food insecurity than other Yemenis. Only a peaceful resolution to the conflict can halt their suffering.
The King Salman Humanitarian Aid and Relief Center has organized a training program to boost professional skills in the Riyadh and Qusayr districts of Hadramaut. In partnership with the United Nations Development Programme, the program provides participants with knowledge in businesses and other professions of their choice and helps them to acquire entrepreneurship skills to start their own business, with the aim of improving the livelihoods of Yemeni people. As the war broke out in Ukraine, hundreds of Yemeni citizens are currently trapped there. Our embassy in Poland has proposed to help evacuate them to Poland and provided them with directions as how to do it swiftly, especially amid restrictions of COVID-19 imposed on Poland. The following report has more details.
Long queues of people are lining Polish borders, awaiting refuge. The past 24 hours alone have witnessed more than 35,000 people crossing the Ukrainian border, among whom are students from Arab countries fleeing the war that broke out between Russia and Ukraine. The Yemeni embassy in Poland has issued directives and instructions to citizens in Ukraine to enter Polish territory to escape the repercussions of the war in the country. The Yemeni ambassador to Poland and Ukraine published general rules for citizens wishing to leave Ukraine and enter Polish territory. These rules encompass all citizens of third non-EU countries who are permitted to enter Poland for a period of time not exceeding 15 days. The instructions outline the steps necessary to enter Poland for two categories of Yemeni citizens. The first are citizens who are currently in Ukraine, residing in a third country other than Yemen and wishing to return to that country. The second category are citizens who are currently in Ukraine and do not have residency in a third country. These citizens will have to return to Yemen through the Arab Republic of Egypt. The instructions have specified the 8 available crossings from Ukraine to Poland by land. Those wishing to enter Polish territory are required to submit a negative COVID-19 test result in either English or Polish within 24 hours from obtaining the test result in order to cross Polish borders. While there are no official statistics concerning the number of Yemenis in Ukraine, the Yemeni embassy in Poland has counted 300 Yemenis in Ukraine.
Coming next. El Kosher, the oldest cafe in Aden, is at risk of closure due to domestic gas crisis.
راتب الواحد 120 ألف والكيس الدقيق ب18 ألف والكيس السكر اليوم ب20 ألف. كم يعني بيعطي هذا الراتب كامل كيس سكر وكيس دقيق؟
المواطن اليمني يعيش في أزمة إنسانية وغذائية مؤلمة من غلاء الأسعار وفحشة الأسعار وغلاء الصرف والعملة الأجنبية في البلد.
حالتي الحين حالة لما ندب احنا شلقينا ما نقدرش ناكل الأكل داخل ما احنا بحاجة صعبة.
Welcome back. El Kosher Cafe is one of the oldest coffee shops in Crater District in Aden. It used to receive hundreds of customers daily. Among those attendees were famous politicians, journalists, and writers. Nowadays, its owner says it could shut down because of severe domestic gas crisis in the country. More details on the story are within this report.
Kosher Cafe in the city of Aden, specifically in Crater District, is the most prominent historical landmark of the city, where the image of Aden becomes complete in the old cafes where everyone drinks tea every day and meets their old friends and exchange conversations and discussions every day in a clear package that evokes with it the past full of memories.
I am Nasser Abdullah, the owner of Kosher, the oldest cafe shop in Crater in Aden city. Kosher was opened about 70 years ago, and we are still working, but now we are facing many issues such as the gas crisis. This made us shut down several times. I try as much as possible to take full care of this place, and we ask authorities to help provide gas so we can continue working.
Kosher Cafe has become threatened with closure permanently due to lack of gas after the customers' reluctance to leave this cafe after repeated closures in the past few days due to gas. Hashim Abdullah Kosher, the owner of this shop, tried providing gas, whose price has risen to 15,000, in order to preserve one of the historical landmarks of Aden. But if gas is not available, the owner of this cafe will have to close its doors to customers and obliterate one of the historical landmarks of Aden.
This coffee shop has been here for over 70 years now. There is no gas, and this is leading to the closure of Kosher coffee shop. Prices became extremely high.
The old cafes of Aden retain their splendor and ancient features. What the pioneers drink is the same original quality of tea that has not changed over the years. Not only are the old people now drinking tea in the old cafes, but also young people who meet up for a cup of tea.
وهذه المقهى واحدة من أقدم وأعرق المقاهي.
Kosher is one of the oldest coffee shops here. This place was full of life and it always had a lot of people. Now there are no people, nothing. What makes me really sad is that all these issues are made up just to cause problems.
Sometimes political and sports figures who frequently come to this cafe exchange their discussions and conversations. Kosher Cafe is the first of many cafes whose doors have been closed. One of the most famous of these cafes is Zako Cafe, which closed its doors months ago. All these people need is support from the authorities to help them continue working and make a living.
A government official has warned of the possibility of a severe stocks of goods crisis in Yemen. The head of Chamber of Commerce and Industry in Aden said that the continued tension between Russia and Ukraine will aggravate hunger and food security in Yemen. He added that Yemen imports about 22% of its needs of Ukrainian wheat, in addition to corn, sunflower oil, and agricultural products. The national currency witnessed a decline after the state of tension during the past weeks, as the exchange rate of dollar increases. In the liberated areas, the dollar exceeded 1,200 riyals, while the Saudi riyal exceeded 300 riyals. According to economists, the campaign implemented by the central bank against violators of its laws has resulted in the closure of more than 100 violating companies. However, it did not stop the rapid deterioration of the Yemeni riyal. The Kuwait Fund for Arab Economic Development and the United Nations Development Programme signed a new agreement to provide 5 hospitals in Yemen with access to solar energy. Entitled Renewable Energy for Improved Health Services Project in Yemen, the agreement will seek to improve the healthcare sector amidst the Yemeni crisis. This support comes by installing solar microgrids that will enable continuous functioning and reduce greenhouse gas emissions, with a grant of $20 million issued by the Kuwait Fund. Here is a reminder of the main headlines. Despite international warnings, Houthi militia continues to use Hodeidah port for military purposes. U.S. Senate and allies pressure President Biden to act immediately and redesignate Houthis as a terrorist group. The Yemen embassy in Warsaw instructs citizens trapped in Ukraine to move to Poland. This is the end of the news. For more, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at Yemen Today English. This is Roshan Fouet. Thank you for watching.